Many thanks, Virginia. I'm now going to call on Julie Posetti from the University of Canberra to speak to us. Welcome, Julie.
Virginia has already declared that she, Shakira and I are friends, and I'll reiterate that. And I want to begin by publicly acknowledging my deep respect for Virginia Haussegger as a woman, as a journalist and as a feminist. And I wholeheartedly support her democratic right to express forceful opinions, as she just has, and to do so without being abused by those who might choose to violently disagree. But I'm afraid I can't agree with Virginia on this issue, as a feminist, as a journalist, nor as a researcher of media coverage of Muslim women and its effects. And just before I go on, I too have some slides that I want to share with you, which I hope will be thought-provoking. They include not just images of traditional Muslim clothing, which may or may not be deemed religious, but also some images that I hope will challenge you to think about other sorts of covering that we wear in our community that may or may not disguise our face, and how we feel about those, just as a means of trying to challenge any cultural stereotypes that you might have. But my objections to Virginia's call to ban the burqa are essentially threefold. Firstly, while the principle of free speech, which Australians do hold dear, supports Virginia's right to make such a call, I believe it would be undermined by a ban that so limits a woman's self-expression and freedom of choice. Secondly, I think it smacks of Orientalism and cultural imperialism, and, ironically, paternalism. Unfortunately, the language in which Virginia has couched her call, and I'm referring here to the article that she wrote in the Canberra Times, which sparked this debate, sees her using language which resonates with xenophobes and racists, and I'll go on to clarify what I mean there. I'm not suggesting for a minute Virginia is herself xenophobic or racist, I want to make that clear now, but the language in which she has couched this call has allowed others to latch onto it as such. Thirdly, activist journalism, I believe, is a valid form of human rights advocacy, but it must be cautiously practiced in the context of awareness of impacts on the subjects of such reportage. This is particularly important when, as a reporter, you're sitting on the outside of a cultural or religious group looking in, or as an anthropologist, and when an issue is as sensitive as this one is. Firstly, the freedom of speech issue. I am not a fan of the burqa or what it symbolises in fundamentalist Islamic states. No man or woman, for that matter, tells me what to wear. And to appropriate a quote from the then banned Steve Biko, the South African anti-apartheid activist, who said, "I write what I like," which is what Virginia has done, "I wear what I like." And I don't believe the state has a place in a woman's wardrobe, either as an enforcer of dress codes, nor as a prohibitor of them. I'm about to bring a baby girl into the world, on a personal note, and as much as I would be disappointed if she chose to shroud her body in a burqa, in the Australian context that is, I'm pleased that she'll be born into a country where she can choose to do so, and I'll defend her right to make such a choice should she go that way. I also agree with Malalai Joya, who Virginia quoted, the feminist Afghani politician and women's activist whose bravely expressed views have exposed her even to assassination attempts. She also said, "I hate that burqa, but if some women like it because of religious cause or part of a culture, I respect them. It's a personal issue." And I prefer Barack Obama to Sarkozy. He said in his recent Cairo speech, "It's important for Western countries to avoid impeding Muslim citizens from practicing religion as they see fit, by dictating, for instance, what clothes a Muslim woman should wear." In Australia, a ban on a burqa may also be unconstitutional, potentially contravening section 116 of the Constitution, which states the Commonwealth shall not make any law for establishing any religion or for imposing any religious observance or for prohibiting the free exercise of any religion. Obviously, Hilary Charlesworth, who sits here, will no doubt be able to better interpret the Constitution as it would apply to such a ban, but the evidence suggests that in Australia, the very, very small number of women who choose to wear the burqa, or rather who wear the burqa, do choose to do so independently as a matter of conscience reflective of religious or cultural values. and to dismiss them, as Virginia did in writing, as being, quote, feeble women who are afraid of modernity, complicit in their own oppression, I find to be patronising and a little elitist, and it has the effect of denying them a voice. It's the same denial of voice that Virginia believes the burqa suppresses. Secondly, the issue of cultural policing. Apart from the practicalities of how do you go about banning one item of clothing in another, and where does the creep begin and end, and do we get out a tape measure to determine the width allowed for a person's face to be revealed? Do we go that way? Apart from that, banning the burqa, I believe, would be an oppressive act which would be designed to enforce Western perceptions of liberation. The irony is that far from defending women's rights, it would effectively deny those rights and require reliance on what some would say were masculinist and paternalistic systems of government and law enforcement. According to the Western perspective, the burqa is a dehumanising icon of gender oppression, keeping women compliant, silent and submissive. But Said's theory of Orientalism posits that Western media typically impose their own intellectual and cultural superiority through reportage of Islamic people and issues, and that they regard the Muslim world and its inhabitants as backward, barbaric and outsiders to Western society. And if you read Virginia's column, you can see elements of Said's theory at play there. In her piece, which was titled "Ban the Un-Australian Burqa," Virginia wrote, "Wearing the burqa or niqab in Australia is an aggressive way of saying, I will not integrate into your society, and I care nothing for the cultural mores and social traditions of this country. Instead, the woman wearing it is demonstrating that she would rather submit to gender apartheid than embrace the social norms of this place. The burqa is an arrogant display of disrespect to Australia and the Australian way of life," end quote. As I said, I know for a fact that Virginia is no racist, nor is she a right-wing reactionary, despite what some people have suggested in responses to her column. But the use of such emotive and inflammatory language, which is reminiscent of some of the Howard-era commentary on this issue, does allow her valid arguments to be dismissed by her detractors and latched onto by xenophobes as such. And while in the staunchly liberal secular French Republic there have been as many calls from the left as from the right for a ban on the burqa, at this time, of course, it comes from the right in the form of Sarkozy's pitch, in multicultural Australia, where the spirit of egalitarianism has encouraged pluralism, this has been almost exclusively the territory of right-wing commentators and politicians like Fred Nile, who called for a burqa ban in 2002, saying that he feared it was being used to disguise bombs. When his critics pointed out that the same effect could be achieved with an overcoat and a scarf or a ski mask, the PM programme on the ABC reported that Fred Nile dismissed this suggestion because in the summer months a coat would be suspicious, as a certain Brazilian found in the UK underground during the aftermath of the London bombings. The journalist went on to say, "This makes you wonder how Santa will go in his big red suit and beard, posing for photographs with his fans this Christmas." Bronwyn Bishop and Sophie Panopoulos similarly called for a ban on veiling in public places in 2005, with Bishop implying that women who wear the hijab are unpatriotic nonconformists. She said it's being used by the sort of people who want to overturn our values as an iconic emblem of distance and a point of difference. Now, while they were talking about a ban on the hijab, there are parallels between the two debates about the ban on the burqa and calls for a ban on the hijab. Virginia wrote, Australia must not allow that radical and overt tool of fundamentalism, the burqa, to be worn here. It defies our cherished values of equality and freedom. But I find this argument a little incongruous. How do you enforce equality by denying freedom of choice and freedom of speech?